Indians were used to watching the world's best cricket, but they weren't used to watching it like this. The IPL is fast-paced, dynamic. It has swagger. In other words, it's a perfect fit for the new India. Buoyed by this success, a franchise-based 2020 cricket event is even coming to the United States. Major League Cricket will make its debut in July 2023. It won't compete with the biggest sports leagues in the country, but a closer look at who's putting up the money tells us a lot about the growing influence of the Indian diaspora in the United States. Shantanu Narayan, CEO of Adobe, is a major investor. So is Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, who wrote in his memoir that his dream as a young man was to attend a small college, play cricket for Hyderabad, and eventually work for a bank. These Indian Americans are perhaps unique in their deep love of cricket, but they represent a growing population in the United States, Indian-born business leaders. I've already mentioned Shantanu Narayan and Satya Nadella. Other big companies like Alphabet, IBM, Deloitte, and Vimeo also all have Indian-born CEOs, whereas people like Balaji Srinivasan and Sriram Krishna are widely admired thought leaders. A recent Stanford University study found that 90 out of 178 founders of the top 500 American unicorns were born in India. So how are people of Indian heritage so massively overrepresented in the most technologically advanced sectors of the economy? According to Ramabhadran Gopalakrishnan, the former executive director of Tata Sons, parent company of the massive Tata Group conglomerate, no other nation in the world trains its citizens in such a gladiatorial manner as India. The people who succeed are the products of a bruising educational and societal system which encourages competition and prizes excellence in technical disciplines. As the saying goes, pressure creates diamonds. Tyler Cowen is increasingly focusing his time on identifying and developing brilliant individuals. Here's what he said about the Indian diaspora in a recent podcast discussion.
I'm strongly of the view that right now is a kind of golden age for the Indian diaspora and also India. So if you look, say, at Florence during the Renaissance, or you look at Central Europe in the early decades of the 20th century, you see remarkable, truly remarkable levels of achievement that don't happen before, don't happen after. You know, it's not some kind of genetic thing, but somehow everything is coming together just right.
Indian Americans are the highest earning ethnic group in the entire United States. More than 70% of all H-1B visas that are issued are given to Indian software engineers. In 2019, the average annual household income of Indian American families was $119,000, almost double the national average. It should also be said that the Indian diaspora succeeds in thousands of ways that are invisible compared to the people who lead the world's biggest businesses. They toil in demanding jobs, work hard to integrate themselves in their new homes, and overcome significant challenges along the way. But everywhere you look, from the family running your local Indian restaurant, to the players succeeding on the pitch in the Indian Premier League, to the CEO of Microsoft, Indians are succeeding. And that helps the people back home. It's showing the world a new side of India, but it's also sending back billions in remittances to family that are still in the homeland. And there's reasons to hope that this success abroad will champion Indians' transition to a more dynamic, free market economy. There's reasons to believe that India's government and businesses are heeding the message. When Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, India was the world's 10th largest economy. Over the next 7 years, it grew by 40%. This growth has been led by modernizing the state, growing the middle class, harnessing India's strengths, and by an active industrial policy. India's leaders have pledged to achieve net zero emissions by 2070. In order to achieve that, they've committed to two highly ambitious targets: To cut their current emissions by more than 1 billion tons from its current trajectory, and to more than triple the amount of power that it generates from non-fossil fuel sources. Renewables are growing fast in India. Helped by low costs and a sunny climate, solar generation capacity in India has increased 50-fold in the last decade. And the capacity of new solar, wind, and hydro plants constructed in the last year was nearly double that of new coal-fired plants. For India, reducing emissions is a strategic play. Prime Minister Modi realizes that cutting carbon emissions is the right thing to do, but he also knows that doing so will help improve India's international standing, grow the domestic manufacturing sector, and reduce energy costs. Meeting their 2030 targets will require adding the equivalent of a second national grid composed entirely of green energy in just 8 years. It's a difficult target, but the fact that Indian leaders are even considering something so bold tells you a lot about the national mindset. Infrastructure is also a key part of the Indian government's growth strategy. The national highway system is over 50% longer than in 2014. The number of domestic air passengers has doubled over the same time period. This has been enabled by rising incomes, which have enabled more Indians to buy cars and plane tickets. Today, 750 million Indians use the internet, enabled by some of the cheapest broadband anywhere in the world. This rapid growth in internet users has inspired the Modi government to modernize the state in the form of the India Stack, a single national digital infrastructure. The India Stack includes Aadhaar, a biometric identity system for all Indians, and a national payment system known as the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI. The government has also replaced hundreds of local taxes with a single nationwide goods and services tax in order to encourage more trading between Indian states and to help modernize local businesses. Indian companies, new and established, are stepping up too. The city of Bangalore has established itself as a local magnet for the country's best engineering talent and a pipeline for thousands of new startups every year. Reliance Industries, one of India's biggest companies, is investing $80 billion into solar panels, batteries, and devices that use green hydrogen. Not to be outdone, India's richest man, Gautam Adani of the Adani Group, is planning a $70 billion investment in green technologies by 2030. The skills base and cultural foundations that helped India become one of the world's leaders in IT should also help it scale up its capacity in green energy. And the country's ambitions go well beyond becoming a green energy superpower. There's no better lens to view these ambitions than through the Tata Group, India's largest company. Across the next 5 years, the Tata Group is planning to spend $90 billion on a series of investments which are designed to onshore its operations. It'll invest close to $10 billion in renewables, $5 billion to build gigafactories in India and Europe, which will supply components for its own cars, weighing up a further $5 billion for a fully fledged semiconductor fab. It's investing in a super app aimed at Indian consumers. And in what might be its highest profile play, it bought Air India, which it plans to turn from a perennial underperformer into a source of national pride. Together, these investments would push Tata's annual capital investment budget to $18 billion, making it the nation's largest investor. While just one company, the symbolism is unmistakable. The Tata Group is betting on India. It's betting on the Indian consumer. It's betting on successfully moving up the value chain, and it's betting on Indian dynamism. Thanks to these investments, India, just like its new generation of cricket players, is swinging for the fences and achieving impressive results. but it still possesses one more important structural advantage that we haven't yet directly discussed. Let's jump into it. India's fourth structural advantage can be summed up relatively easily. It's not China. What's more, it's China's adversary. This fact alone is contributing to greater influence on the world stage. Despite a long history of non-alignment and a reluctance to join into alliances, India is drawing closer to the United States and positioning itself as a valuable ally for other countries in the Indo-Pacific who want to reduce their dependence on China. The best example of India's newfound confidence and influence is a simple four-sided shape, the Quad. Originally established in 2007 and then revived in 2017, the Quad brings together the United States, Australia, Japan, and India to discuss a shared vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific region underpinned by a rules-based maritime order. The other three member nations are all prosperous countries accustomed to taking a leading role in the Indo-Pacific region. However, India has succeeded at subtly shaping the Quad in accordance with its own preferences. The first obvious way is China. It's well known that China and India don't get along. This is partly due to competition between the world's two largest nations. It's partly due to a disputed Himalayan border. And it's partly due to India's irritation at China's closeness with Pakistan, India's other great rival. But as much as India may regard China with suspicion, its leaders understand that the risks of escalation are too great to contemplate. So India has always been very careful to not give China or other neutral countries in the region reasons to see the Quad as a threat to their own security. It doesn't talk about the Quad being a security alliance. Instead, it talks about the Quad as an open forum for countries to come together and discuss security beyond the bounds of hard military power. The second way in which India is shaping the Quad is when it comes to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. All other member states issued very strongly worded bilateral statements condemning the invasion. The Quad's joint statement was much more toned down, instead referring to the situation in Ukraine as a tragic humanitarian crisis. India's historic closeness with Russia dates back to the Cold War. But a statement such as this is also clearly a product of India's long-standing preference for multilateral institutions. The biggest and most influential multilateral institution of them all is the United Nations. Arguably the most important part of the UN is the Security Council. This body is responsible for all international peace and security matters, approving changes to the UN Charter, and admitting new members. The most notorious feature of the Security Council is the Permanent Five, a group of 5 permanent member states that can unilaterally veto a resolution. The Permanent Five consists of the United States, United Kingdom, France, Russia, and China.
There has been growing pressure for change in international organizations.
There is a growing belief, especially among members of the developing world, that the Permanent Five no longer reflect the realities of the modern world. India agrees. Addressing the Council in 2014, Narendra Modi said,
"We must reform the United Nations, including the Security Council, and make it more democratic and participative. Institutions that reflect the imperatives of the 20th century won't be effective in the 21st stone. It would face the risk of irrelevance, and we will face the risk of continuing turbulence with no one capable of addressing it."
India will soon be the world's most populous country. More than 100,000 Indian troops have served UN missions over the last half-century. India has more peacekeepers in the field right now than the Permanent Five members of the Security Council do combined. And it's a nuclear state, but it's not a permanent member of the Security Council yet. That needs addressing. Each member of the Permanent Five, except for China, supports India's candidacy. As recently as November, France, a longtime security partner, reiterated its desire for India to join the Permanent Five. When India finally does join, it won't simply be righting a wrong. It'll reflect India's growing stature in the international halls of power. That geopolitical stature, especially counter to China, will have economic implications. In a world that's growing increasingly skeptical of globalization, large economies like the United States are increasingly making decisions about global trade not on the basis purely of dollars, but on the basis of national security. Being a big developing country, not to mention one with such expertise in science and technology that isn't China, is a strategic advantage for India. And it's one that will continue working to India's advantage economically. I've laid out the bull case for India, but what about the bear case? Well, India certainly has its challenges. I believe that there are 4 that loom largest. The first comes from Narendra Modi's attempts to remake India into a Hindu state. The second challenge lies in the formidable health and security challenges posed by climate change. The third is an education system which does not deliver enough outcomes for enough of its people. And finally, India must address its leakage of elite technical talent. The size of India's global impact in the 21st century will hinge on how successfully it overcomes these challenges and harnesses its strengths. So many things excite me about India. It combines a population that will soon surpass even China, with the demographic profile of a West African nation, along with the dynamism and love of technology of the United States and the democratic tradition of the United Kingdom. But when it really gets down to it, the thing that excites me most is that despite the huge strides that this country has already taken, the incredible talent of its people, the demographic dividend that it's already enjoying, and its growing influence on the world stage, there is still so much potential yet to fulfill. It's impossible to predict the future, but I believe that India is laying the foundations for it to become a truly prosperous nation, and one that makes even more positive contributions to humanity. Like every other country, India faces its challenges, but its strengths make it uniquely well positioned to meet them. As the century unfolds, I fully expect India to emerge as one of its biggest winners.